just need to take that down a notch because Nick's a bit taller than I am. Well, welcome to the program, and it's exciting to start the PhD, I'm sure, for you. And what I wanted to do today was just to give you some ideas about my own PhD journey, what's happened, the sort of challenges that have occurred, the highlights of it. And I'm using, I guess, the metaphor of a voyage because that's kind of a bit what it's like. So I'm near the end of the voyage. I'm birthing, I hope, to a completed thesis in the next 5 months. And I'm in sociology. My thesis is on refugees and how they mix in local communities in Australia. So I've been doing research in Brisbane, Sydney and Adelaide. But essentially it's a 3-year journey. So it's a very defined journey. Unlike the past, my supervisors tell me they took 6, 7 years, but this is quite a defined journey. I would really challenge that it's a solo journey, and often you will talk to people and they will tell you that the journey has been quite lonely for them, and I really challenge that. I don't think it needs to be like that, and I'll be talking about that today a bit. But essentially in the first year, I would say it's cruise time, as in like you're starting the journey, not that you're cruising, and that you're preparing for this PhD. You've got to make some important decisions, and you're going to have to make them pretty quickly. Are you going to do your thesis by publication, or are you going to do a monograph? If you're involved with ethics, you really need to get onto that very, very quickly because that's important, and it will hold up your field work if you haven't got that ethics clearance. And you need to review the literature, select a referencing system. The second year is sailing along, so you really should be into field work, really right into your thesis. And on the third year, of course, is a hard trek and completion. And what I've found was, I wouldn't say at any point it's really been that relaxed, but lately it's felt like time is completely speeding up, and it is in a way. And so it's not time to be, you need to be prepared for this time basically, so that you're not going to be getting too anxious or stressed out by it. So just a few things. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking like just some of the stuff that had gone on for me during this 3-year period. And I think it's important just to accept that stuff goes wrong. And I'm going to give you some examples of some of the things that happened for me. It included ethics taking a lot longer than I expected. I had a lot of queries with my ethics, so I had to go back. Once I started my field work, more ethical issues kind of came up where I had to actually go back again. I interview refugees and people seeking asylum, and so I was supposed to get signed consent, but of course the first person I interviewed, I realised they didn't speak in their, or write in their own language, nor in English, so I had to go back to the ethics. I had a personal situation. One of my daughters got incredibly sick. I had to take 5 months leave. When I came back from that, one of my field sites decided to withdraw. So that was kind of quite a major thing for me. On the good side, another field site with the most amazing group and so supportive to me because they knew what I'd gone through and did everything they could to help. When I came back from the 5 months break, I also had a change of supervisor. One of my supervisors got a job somewhere else, so it was kind of, yeah, it's kind of one of those things that you can't control that. Like, that was a really good thing for her, but not such a good thing for me. And it's worked out. I got another supervisor. So the other thing that happened, it's a minor thing, but just a thing to be aware of. I got a massive library fine in 2016 as well, and that took some time to renegotiate. So I think just accepting that it's 3 years. You think about the last 3 years in your life, and I'm sure you would have had events, maybe death, sickness, people you know who aren't well, maybe you're not well. And I guess where I'm at with it is that you can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails. So for instance, about 6 weeks ago, I discovered Mendeley doesn't work with Macs anymore. I just upgraded my Mac. If you're Mac users, just be aware of this. And I felt like having a tantrum, to be honest. But then I thought, gee, just think about what some of the issues that have gone on for you during the thesis, and I just thought, just get up, get back to EndNote and move on. So the other important relationship you have is with your supervisors, and I was thinking about this on the way here today, and I think every supervision relationship is quite unique. So I wouldn't be comparing yourself with other people necessarily. Your supervisors aren't your parents, and they're not your best friends. And you need to work out what you need. So some of you might need closer supervision, other people might not need such close supervision. So you may have supervisors who give you a lot of freedom, and that's really great, but it means maybe they don't attend to fine details. So it's really yourself working it out and communicating with your supervisors, and not being scared to raise the difficult issues, because, you know, you will have them. Again, it's a 3-year period and things don't always stay the same. I think it's important to establish links with other unis. So again, your supervisors are your central point, but you need other scholars to be talking to. And I know I had a situation in Brisbane where I had just done 2 what I felt were really disastrous interviews. I was able to go and talk to a refugee scholar who said to me, what you're describing is my everyday life. And just to know that, like, I'm in a space that is very messy, it's very complicated. So it's good to reach out to people, not to always pretend everything's going well, because it does go up and down. And in that light, campus wellbeing is there for you to use. It's a great resource. I know in my masters I went to them and discovered that I was a perfectionist. Which is something I'd never realised, but it's been of great help for me to realise that that's a tendency I've got, and I would bet my bottom dollar that most of you are too. So it's important to realise those things are there for you. Also your peers, you're, again, you know, 3 years, you need people around you who are going to support you. It's not a solo voyage. I know when I came back from 5 months off, I came to the PhD room, and on the PhD desk was a care package from other PhD students that I'm friends with, and scented candles and lotions, and that just made me feel really good about coming back. It was kind of a difficult step to think, oh, back in here again. And I meet with people for coffee. I've got someone in the room, not sure where she is at the moment, there she is up the back. We've done a lot of artwork together, and that's something, again, too, I think you discover different sides of yourself that will help you as a researcher. Particularly in first year, I would go to everything, go to the HDR, the library training, go to the writing boot camps. They're fantastic resources, and again, you can meet other people. The writing groups are fantastic. I'm in a writing group, and I have been for 2 years. We meet every 2 weeks. A week before we meet, 1 or 2 people will submit writing, and we'll be reviewing that writing in the writing group. And you might kind of think, oh, why would I want to work on other people's? But what happens is that by critiquing other people's work, you develop your own ability to critique your own work. So in our writing group, it's pretty strict, like you have to read people's work, you have to track change or make comments. Every person in that group gives their feedback about what's happened. So it's been a fantastic resource, and it's also just a place where you can kind of come and talk about, you know, doing the PhD. Like, I remember one day we were just talking about the things we say to ourselves. You know, like that sometimes we can be a bit uncompassionate to ourselves, you know, say things like, oh, you're a rotten writer when you're writing. And look, I have a stream of thoughts going through my head that I've trained to kind of go out the other side. So we sort of, I drew it up, but we had these sayings, and it was things like, I can't direct the wind, but I can change the sails. Pressure makes diamonds. I'm proud of you. Love my thesis cave. So it might sound a bit corny, but sometimes you really need that support and need to know other people are kind of going through the same thing. So I would just recommend you join a writing group straight off. Definitely go to the writing courses. So the writing groups aren't saying that you're a poor writer. I mean, people in my group are excellent writers, but it can really help you. the last point there is just there's blogs like the Thesis Whisperer, Patter, Doctoral Writing. They're all quite helpful blogs to just be looking at. So some of the challenges I would say of the PhD is anxiety. I don't think I know anybody who hasn't got a bit anxious during this time. And it's probably trying to look at anxiety in a positive sort of way. How can I shift myself to use it as a way to motivate myself? Like, for instance, at the moment, I have to finish the thesis. So I don't want to be chilling out and relaxing all day. I need a bit of anxiety because I need to move it. But there's a point where it can go over the top and immobilise people, and that's when you need to be really looking at what's happening. I mentioned perfectionism before. It's something that's well known in the PhD cohorts. Again, a good thing in some ways, but it can lead you to some paths you may not want to be on. A lot of people have you heard about imposter syndrome? No, some of you have. Okay, so imposter syndrome is this idea of I don't deserve to be here, or it's my secret. I'm totally hopeless. I'm really not good at what. How did I ever get a scholarship? It must have been a mistake, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I sat next to somebody at a dinner, a professor at a dinner last year, who said to me, "I still have imposter syndrome." So it's just it just may be there for you. It may not be, but just to know that lots of people have it. Some people also have writer's block, and again, you need to really address this. You can't be just stuck with this. Ethics and fieldwork were an issue for me, and again, if you're doing complex fieldwork, get onto it really early. Academic writing requires you to lift up a level. So you might, and like I'm a plain English writer, that's what I used to work at. I used to kind of write a lot, and I'd write in language everybody could understand. Now, I'm not saying academic writing is writing you can't understand, but it's a different register. So that's a challenge to dealing with that. And that last point I think I've covered before. So now that I've given you all the bad stuff, let's move to some of the better stuff. One of the highlights for me was being on the NUMAC committee last year, and that's a conference that's organised between Newcastle University and Macquarie University. And I had the opportunity to help organise the conference and chair a session. And while that might not seem like much, when I chaired that session, it wasn't a perfect chaired session. And I was able to, after the end of it, do some reflection on how I might do that differently. And what that enabled me to do was that when I went overseas, I chaired a session, but because I'd had a bit of practice and I'd had a bit of feedback, the session went really well. I've also been involved as a peer writing assistant, which is basically just volunteering to help people look at their writing. The Postgraduate Research Fund is something that I would really, really encourage you to do. It's something that most people would do in their second year, but it takes a lot of organisation. So I would actually be thinking about that right now. What are overseas conferences that I can attend? Who are some of the scholars that I might go and speak to? My trip was really fantastic. It took a lot of work to organise. I basically went to a conference, a big conference. I went to a small conference in England. I've met, I think, the person who would probably be marking my thesis. I met some scholars I'd been reading. I'd read their work, but it was great to sit down and talk to them. I also went to Germany, to the Max Planck Institute, and spoke to scholars there. So I see it as a really important highlight. In fact, so important, I made a book out of it with some of the pictures of people I'd seen. I'm a great believer in public sociology, so I've been presenting at conferences, at seminars. I think it's really important that we get our work out there. It also enables people to ask us questions or highlight areas we may not be aware of. You hopefully will have an opportunity to teach, and again I'd say do that in year 2. I'm not doing it at all at the moment because teaching requires quite a bit of work. So again, just depends where you're at and what you're doing about that. But I think for me, just being able to enter this world of scholarship has been amazing, and even though it hasn't been a perfect journey, but I think what it's given me is an enormous amount of self-awareness. I feel much more self-aware and stronger in myself. And let's face it, how many of us get the opportunity to spend years of our lives researching an area we're really passionate about? It's a real gift, and I think we should really take that with us. So just some tips. It's really important to ask for what you need. Like if you just sit back with your supervisors, like a wallflower waiting to be noticed, that's probably what's going to happen. So, you know, if you need to see your supervisor, email them. Take minutes at supervision. If you need other help, go and talk to people. Don't just be, you know, sitting by yourself. You may need leave. And again, important to talk to people about this. There's an article that's written saying it's not a Nobel Prize, and sometimes I think this is where the anxiety and perfectionism can come in. You're making a contribution, but it's not a Nobel Prize. Your journey really is learning to be a scholar. It's learning to develop those scholarly skills and communication skills, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It will be an important part of your life, and a lot of scholars have said this to me. It was a really important stage, but it's not the end. You keep on going as you finish. It's important to take breaks, exercise and rest time. Pay attention to administration. Like it's a funny thing to say, but it's amazing how many people get behind in their admin. Watch your budget, and for me, one of my big lessons was returning library books because I had a problem with that. And you're not in a jail. Like sometimes, I actually spoke to someone last year and she said, I feel like I'm in a jail. And I thought, it's a self-imposed jail. And you've got to remember that, you know, you've got your partner, your family and friends, and they're travelling with you. And if they feel like they're in a jail, it's not a very good look. So it's making active decisions about that. It's easy to spend 7 days a week on this stuff. I know I can get into that myself, but it's important to have breaks and know that you have relationships that are here now and will be there when you finish as well. The idea of, we've talked about this in my writing group about self-compassion, you know, so giving yourself a hand. When you know you've got judgmental thoughts, you know, just trying to either let them go, do something about them, but trying not to be judgmental. And the last point, obviously, as a writer myself at the moment, is write every day. And most people will say that to you, no matter what you're writing, whether it's a 3-year plan, whether it's a summary of a book, whether it's something else, it's important to write every day. So that's the journey I've been on. I hope you might have found that useful. But I'd like you to think about how you'd like to look back on your PhD. Maybe if you could just take a moment and talk to the person next to you, or move seats so you knew someone, and talk about how you'd like to look back on your PhD.